All right, this is edition 2 of our big ADP swing type podcast. Great intro, Dan, said nobody. This is Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. I'm Dan Bespris. Thanks as always for watching, everybody, and listening. You can find me on Twitter at Dan Bespris and at Old Man Squad. That feed will, of course, follow you back. And a reminder that all shows nowadays are brought to you by our pals at Bet Online, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. Think you know your stuff? Get in on BetOnline's $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of $200K. When the game's over, head on over to the online casino at BetOnline and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of their 150 slots. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Bet Online. The game starts here. Today's episode, we're looking at the latest edition of ADP Movers, guys whose draft position has shifted substantially over the past week, and as a result, we got to look to see if it changes how we feel about those guys. This is very important because it gives us an idea of where dudes are headed, because the ADP move, as we talk about every week, is usually only about a half of how far a player is actually shifting in where they're going in draft. So let's go through this thing. We'll start at the top. I've got this one categorized into big names, which is basically the first 4 rounds or so. Mid-round, mid-tier guys, that's like the next 4 rounds, and then the late dudes, the last 4 rounds. These are the guys that have shifted, I believe, enough where we need to talk about it. So let's go through. We've got about 30 names to get through. We'll try to do each one in about 1 minute. Keep this show to a half an hour or less, because apparently people think my shows go a little bit too long. Remember to like, rate, and subscribe. Let's begin. Anthony Edwards moving down the board. He is now all the way down to 11.4. Still not late enough in my eyes. Still not late enough. We're not quite there yet. But we're on our way. So for Ant, he's moving the right direction, at least in terms of us considering him, but he's not there yet. Kyrie Irving down to 18.8, and he is now starting to push up against the idea of a playable dude for me. I did not like Kyrie where he was originally going. I'm more interested in where he's at now, because with a guy like Irving, and let's pause and talk about him. And again, some of these guys will talk longer than others. Kyrie's a top 10 per game guy. Amazing percentages, low turnovers, good steals, decent blocks for a guard, 5 rebounds for a guard, 5 assists, 3 threes last year, 25 plus points. He was awesome, but he missed 24 games. Again. The math really comes down to a per game versus totals discussion. Games cap roto, Kyrie at 18.8 is totally fine. Head-to-head, where you need every game out of a guy, he got to number 27 last year by totals in 58 ball games. We're talking about a guy that if he gets to about 63 games, he's an early 20, like right around number 20, basically, in totals rank. And that's kind of where I would consider taking him, is around 20. So we are now very close to Kyrie Irving being a playable dude. In fact, you could take him here and I don't think it'd be the end of the universe because of how efficient he is. And in Roto, I would suggest even taking him here. For head-to-head, we're probably about 1 to 2 ADP slots away from where you're taking a guy who has a little bit of gravy. If Kyrie plays 65 games, he smokes this mark. I don't think he's going to get there, but crazier things have happened. James Harden, his ADP is 22.1, but most drafts that we're seeing, he's going closer to the 14 to 18 range. So this one still hasn't fully caught up. At 22, you're definitely taking Harden. At 14 to 18, I'm still probably taking him. So we can assess him again a week from now when he's probably even farther up the board. De'Aaron Fox has been on the rise. He's up to number 25.7, which to me is where you take him if you're punting free throws. He was number 24 last year without punting, but the 2 steals per game and 21 shots a night feel kind of unsustainable with DeMar DeRozan in town. Free throws could get better. Crazy. Again, we'll use the line. Crazier things have happened. He's just not a guy. Like, if I'm not punting free throws, I'm probably not taking Fox at 25 because that's basically where he maxes out in 9-cat, but he makes total sense here on a punt free throw team. Tyrese Maxey ADP down to 26.7. He is also now getting closer to where I'd consider him. I'm looking for Maxey around 30. And given the fact, again, that the ADP is only reflecting part of the move, most likely, he's going not that far away from 30. And I think that's an okay spot for him. So Maxey probably moves into the I'd consider him now. DeJounte Murray down to number 30, and that's not far enough for me. Alperen Şengün up to number 32, and he's another build guy because Şengün was 60 last year if you cared about free throws, and he was 24 if you didn't. So totally fine spot if you're punting free throws. Not my favorite spot for him if you're not. Ja Morant all the way up to 34.3. He always gets off to a hot start. So if he does it again this year, probably trade him for a second rounder after he gets off to the hot start. This is way too early for Ja in my book. I don't understand it. I know he's more of an 8-cat guy than a 9-cat guy, so that's part of it. He's a high turnover dude. His percentages were real high in the 9 games he played last year because that's how it always goes with him. Free throw and field goal come out of the chute better, and then they tend to taper as he settles into the season, gets tired, playing through aches and pains and all that stuff. Ja Morant in an 8-cat league is probably going to hover somewhere near 50 would be my guess. 9-cat, he's not getting anywhere near that. And if you're punting turnovers in 9-cat, then he gets closer here. But again, we've priced him out. So not enough, or going the wrong way, I should say. Cade all the way up to 36.9. He's been sliding forward in recent drafts as well. He's another solid choice if you're punting turnovers. Second half of last year in particular, he got a lot better. He was number 48 in 8-cat second half last year, and that was without much in the steals or blocks department, where you kind of hope that those things get a little bit better. Again, we've probably priced him out, but assists and scoring are hard to come by, so you're going to see guys like Cade go typically earlier than they need to. 37 is... I honestly don't even know if that's within reach in 9-cat. It is an 8-cat, so do with that as you please. Understanding, again, that assists are hard to get when you combine with scoring, although you can get some assists that are not combined with scoring a little bit easier. Freddie VanVleet is down to 38.9. I have no idea how many times I'm going to have to come on this show and tell you guys that I love Fred VanVleet before he actually starts to move up the board. Apparently, the answer is more times than we're at right now. Freddie's also a terrific punt field goal guy, and you don't even need it. Punt field goal, he was number 10 last year. 9-cat, he was number 17. Why he's at 38.9 is anybody's guess. People are like, oh, yeah, young guys are going to take his job. No, they're not. That team's trying to make a playoff run. They brought in a $40 million vet to lead them to that. So I love Freddie VanVleet at this price. I loved him at his previous price, and I love him even more now. And the last early rounder on the list that we'll talk about is Desmond Bane, who finished last year as the number 33 ranked player. But, of course, Ja Morant is back, and Marcus Smart is back, and well, he's not going to get 18.5 shots a game, but still Desmond Bane is a good percentages guard who, he shot 46.5% last year while basically the main dude. So you could actually see that number maybe even tick up a little, but his steals are fine, not great. Blocks are okay, actually, for a guard. Good three-point dude, good scorer, good free throw shooter, great free throw shooter, honestly, if he got there more often. Turnovers will come down, but obviously we'd prefer the usage. So Bane probably belongs around where he's going now. That ADP down to 40.9 is actually an indicator that he's going more in the kind of mid-40s, and I'm totally fine with Desmond Bane as a mid-4th round pick. Before we get to the mid-rounders, let's take a quick commercial break. And welcome back from the break, which may or may not have existed for some of you. I'm hoping YouTube put it in the right spot. I put the one in after the fact. Please, again, remember to like, rate, and subscribe as we push our way through this board. Mid-rounders on the move. Pascal Siakam just keeps going sooner and sooner and sooner. and I get it because he's one of those guys where he was number 78 last year when he kind of became a punt free throw dude. He was not always that bad at foul shooting. So there's an expectation, and a reasonable one perhaps, that number ticks back up a little bit. And if you get him to league average in free throw, which I never quite got that high, he was number 53 last year with league average foul shooting, which makes him kind of priced out here at 51.8. He was already a guy that I wasn't exactly targeting, but the fact that he's moving sooner and sooner makes him a harder sell. Darius Garland is another dude that's been rocketing up the boards because he's, this happens every time. These point guards that are basically anywhere in a draft, they're always going to go earlier than a traditional ranking might suggest they go, but a lot of that's because assists and scoring is a hard combo to find later in a draft. It's the fact that Darius Garland is kind of on an island at this part of the draft, early 6th round. He's going late 5th in a lot of spots. That's why he keeps pushing earlier and earlier, because there's no one around him that does anything like what he does from a fantasy stat set perspective. The next one is like D'Angelo Russell, 20 slots later. I'm not a huge fan of Garland in the late 50s where he's going. That's where he was at last year with punt turnover. 8 cat, he has a really good shot to beat this mark. 9 cat, probably not. So this is going to come down to turnover tolerance. If your team is very good at turnovers coming into this spot, you can definitely take Garland, and it won't matter. The fact that he's a bad turnovers dude won't really matter that much because, you can only be so good at a category. So that, you just kind of absorb the negative hit and then hope that his other stuff kind of comes back a little bit. He was beat up and injured. We just really never got his legs underneath him last season. We've seen him do better than this with Donovan Mitchell the prior year, which again makes him, I think, a perfectly reasonable grab at this spot in 8 cat and maybe a little bit priced out in 9. Tobias Harris has an ADP of 70.5. That's been on its way up. He's actually going in the 60s. I'm still fine with it despite the increase. Kristaps Porzingis down to 76.5. He is falling like a boulder because he's going to miss half the season. I honestly, redraft, I don't care where he goes. I'm not drafting him. Keeper leagues, I would take him probably, I'd love to get him in the 9th round if at all possible. Maybe 8th if I'm feeling real confident about my team to sit on a dude. Because he's going to play half the season. He's not just a wasted roster slot the whole year. So keeper league, you probably go 8th round. Redraft, I don't want him at all. Bradley Beal is on the rise. He's up to number 84.1, which again belies perhaps the fact that he's mostly going late 70s now. And I'm good with that. He was number 72 last year with a really bad start to the season. Despite the increase, I'm still into Bradley Beal. Jonas Valanciunas is a guy who's going the other way. He's falling. His ADP is now 85.7. He is typically going here in the mid to late 80s. And the fears around him are reasonable. The fears being that he's going to get traded midseason and then he won't have a value anymore. And it's probably the case. So, but we're starting to get to the point now where I become okay with it because, Valanciunas really only needs 24 minutes to get to this type of marker. He didn't get much usage last year. Don't look at how he was utilized in New Orleans. It was a bad example because, he's going to have more to do in Washington on a per minute basis than what he had with the Pelicans, especially this last season. But really any time that the Pels were fairly healthy, he just had nothing to do. If Valanciunas starts to go reliably in the 90s, I'm back in on it. I hated the fact that he opened up with an ADP in the 70s. That felt nuts, but he's finally going the right way. Isaiah Hartenstein is on the rise. This ADP board on Yahoo had listed him as 87.5, but again, that only tells about half the story. He's typically going more towards the early 80s, and I'm still into it. I would take Hartenstein as early as 65 if I had to, because I think the floor is so incredibly high for a guy that's as versatile as he is. Later, you can get him the better, and the fact that he's moving forward makes a lot of sense, but I'm still into him. Clint Capella is all the way up to 87.6. I want nothing to do with this pick. If you're punting free throws, just take one of the guys going near 110. You can get him 2 rounds cheaper. Do that. And if you're not punting free throws, he has no business being here on a team that is at some point this year, next year, the year after that, not going to need him anymore. Capella's current situation, current rising ADP is one of the weirdest things happening in fantasy sports right now. Jalen Suggs is down to 94.2. And I got to be honest with you guys, and I've said this before. Jalen Suggs is one of the dudes that I really just don't know what he's going to be this season. I feel pretty good about almost everybody else in the league, or at least guys, in the top 140 or whatever. I think I have a measured idea of what they're going to be. I don't know what Jalen Suggs is going to be. He doesn't seem like a dude who needs to do more on offense for Orlando to succeed. They brought in KCP to handle a little bit more of the floor spacing, but Suggs did turn himself into a much better three-point shooter this last year. We know he's an outstanding defender. He's going to get his minutes. I think the thought has to just be, look, Suggs played 27 minutes a game last year. If that goes up to 29, then he's inside the top 100. That's the calculation here. I don't know that the ceiling is super high because he's more of a defensive specialist 3-and-D dude. But if the 3-and-D dude goes, again, an extra 10% of his minutes, well, he jumps around round and a half forward. So he's probably fine here, but I've literally not drafted Jalen Suggs in a single league. And if he keeps falling and he starts going outside the top 100, which feels like it might be the case here coming up, then I might start to look into him. Jakob Poeltl's on the rise. He's going at 98.7. I would take him here. I'm still good with Poeltl. He's a guy that should be around top 90 at kind of like an absolute worst case scenario. So we're still getting him near his fantasy floor. And finally, the final mid-rounder is Terry Rozier, whose ADP is down to 99.9. Pretty wild, honestly. And I get it. Like, his time in Miami was kind of a fits and starts thing. He hurt his neck. We didn't really get a chance to see what he was going to be with the Heat late last year. And when he was in there, there was no Tyler Hero, or Butler was on a rest day or something like that. And so we got a Terry Rozier iteration that was still pretty good, like top 60 range. But we didn't see much of that team is all together kind of Rozier. Still, his fantasy game is pretty damn translatable for a shooting guard type because his threes are really high, steals are very good, and free throw percent are all very good. And a lot of the times with the shooting guards, we talk about how they need to have the steals. Some of them don't. Rozier does. So we're talking about a guy that, if he can get to 14 shots a game, which is a decent amount, but remember, Jimmy Butler is typically more of a get fouled, pass first combo kind of dude. And Adebayo is not going to be just chucking away out there. And Hero's always banged up and Butler's always banged up. And so I think there is a path for Rozier to have a pretty decent fantasy season. With the fear, of course, being that because we haven't seen that team really at full strength, could the bottom fall out? Maybe. Still, we're into the 9th round now, and I'm willing to take a shot on a 9th rounder with some name recognition that could jump 3 rounds if things kind of break his way. So I like Rozier outside the top 100, and that's where he's going right now. And here are some of the late movers. RJ Barrett, he's been flying up the board, and I know some of that is because he has seemingly fixed the field goal percent issue that's plagued him throughout his career, and so he's putting up these robust scoring numbers with Toronto. His free throws are all over the map. I'm still very skeptical of Barrett because he's not going to get any threes. He gets almost no steals and blocks. He's a high turnovers dude whose free throw percent is bad. And I'm also frankly worried that the field goal percent comes back down to earth a little bit. Maybe not as awful as it was in New York, but probably not as good as it was in Toronto either. So for me, Barrett's still more of a punt free throw dude. If you're punting free throws, he's not going to kill you anywhere. He's not going to help you in 3 or 4 categories, but he's not going to kill you in the places where I still think he could be a huge drag. So I don't really like RJ Barrett going this soon, but obviously he's a team build kind of guy. If Ivica Zubac is on the way up, we've been seeing him go inside the top 100 lately. I'm still into him in the 90s. If Zubac gets into the 80s, I might peel my interest away. I like him a lot. He's a very safe, reliable player who was number 106 last year in 26.5 minutes. I think his role is going to be bigger from a per minute standpoint, and I think his minutes are going to be bigger. But it's not going to be this like colossal flying leap to 32 minutes a game. It's going to be like 26.5 minutes goes to 28.5. And maybe 7.5 shots becomes 9, which is all good. But that pushes him up to, 75, 80 range kind of dude. Probably not top 50. Still, where he's at right now, I remain into Zubats because extra minutes means he can squeeze himself up into that positive blocks department, and he's a good percentages center. So, yeah. Walker Kessler's up to number 104, and we're starting to get a little bit close to where I'd say there are better, lower risk guys to take. So I'm probably not super into Kessler at 104, especially when we don't know what Utah's doing with their front court yet. Because the next guy on the board is John Collins, who's up to 105. And it's really going to come down to who's the starting center for this team. Because if it's John Collins, he was a top 50 guy. Walker Kessler was more like top 90 in that role, but his minutes weren't particularly high. His blocks trended down as the season went on. I don't know what the hell that was all about. If I'm taking a chance between these two dudes, I'd rather go the John Collins route. Zach Edey's on the fall. He's down to 107.8. He's going to keep falling, and I don't care. He's not a guy that I'm interested in. Chris Middleton is up to 108, and that's too soon for me. Middleton has been the biggest headache in all of fantasy sports the last couple of seasons. He's just not playing. They're going very, very gentle with him. And last year, he was on a minutes cap almost the entire year. And still he couldn't stay healthy. Guess he was better in the playoffs, if I'm remembering right. It doesn't even matter. Like, yes, I get it. Chris Middleton, if he plays 32, 33 minutes a game, he's still a top 60 fantasy play. But this dude had 2 ankle surgeries. Just, don't do it. Let somebody else take that risk. I know we're getting late enough where it doesn't hurt you if he puts up zeros, but it does hurt you if he puts up, sometimes little bits, and then you have to sit on him when he's not actually an injured list dude. He's going to be a bigger roster headache than he is fantasy stat headache. Jeremy Grant has been going earlier. He's up to number 111.8, and that's too soon for me. I just think that dude has given up on doing anything that requires hustle. So, nope. Derek Lively up to 112.9. He is a stellar grab here if you're punting free throws. He's a totally fine grab here if you're not. Because he's probably going to be just inside the top 109 cat, and he's going to be way ahead of that if you're punting foul shots. Which, as I get it, still considered 9 cat, but you're really only caring about 8. He was number 82 punt free throw last year, and he'll probably get a little bit better than that. So this is a great spot for him if you're punting foul shots at 112.9. And again, if you're not, it's fine. Just, he didn't get to the line very often last year, so maybe that's the saving grace, because he was really bad when he did. Speaking of really bad when they did, Mitchell Robinson, ADP of 120.2. He is also a perfectly reasonable grab here if you're punting foul shots. And if you're not, I'd actually probably prefer him over Lively because it feels like Robinson has an easier path to 27 minutes than Lively does. Their fantasy games are remarkably similar. Robinson, a little bit of a better rebounder. Lively was a little bit more engaged on offense. And again, that partially is just the team that they're on, but that hasn't changed. Robinson was also weirdly low in his blocked shots this last year. That's a number you expect to come back up a little bit. So between those two guys, I'd probably rather take the shot on Mitch Rob because we've seen him up near that top 50 mark, even if you're not punting when he had starters minutes. He's obviously way less durable, but at this point, you're gunning for upside, right? And that's why I like Onyeka Okongwu. He's at 122.6 now, and we've seen him go in the 1-teens lately. But I'm into it because we basically know that Okongwu is going to be around number 110 if nothing changed year over year. And I can't imagine his situation got worse because the Hawks got younger, they got quicker, blah, blah, blah. I don't know if they got quicker, but it does feel like the era of the Capella has to be starting to come to a close. And that doesn't mean that it's all going to just happen on day one, But at least understanding that you have Okongwu, you have this guy who's kind of in the doesn't matter zone where you can start him and he doesn't really hurt you. Doesn't help much. But there's so many ways that he can be better than that. So I like Okongwu even at his higher price. Let's keep an eye on him as we go forward, though. Two more names on the board. Colin Sexton also on the rise, but not by as much as you'd think. He's at 123.5, and I'm still seeing him go between 115 and 120, and I love him there. He was 107 over the entirety of last season, and then you had some like weird number stuff to work out. But over the last 2 months, when he was the full-time starter, taking 15.5 shots a game, he was number 71. And he's that rare late draft combo of scoring and assists, and he does it without killing your percentages. I know he doesn't shoot the three ball. I don't care. I love Colin Sexton here, even at his higher price. And the final big jumper is Brandin Podziemski, who's up to 127.8. He has now kind of unilaterally, moved into the last round pick. That's like the guy everybody's targeting the last round is Brandin Podziemski. And I waxed poetic on Pods, was it a couple days ago on the show? I can't remember exactly what episode it was. Just about this idea of, I've been down on him fantasy-wise because he's not a great finisher. He's a decent three-point shooter, though, but he's not a great finisher, so the 2-point percentage is not going to be great. 3 points going to be fine. But depending on how this shot selection works out, that means his field goal percent is probably going to be low. And his free throw number rookie year wasn't very good, and maybe that gets better season over season. But he's also not a guy who seemed like he really wanted to be the dude shooting all that much. And I get it. People are like, oh, Clay's gone, so there's all this stuff that's available now. I look at the guys the Warriors have. I look at Buddy Hield, who just showed up. I don't want Buddy Hield on my team necessarily, but he's a guy who's not afraid to take those shots. And Wiggins will take those shots, and Kuminga's going to take those shots, and Pods will get some, but he's just not magically going to transform himself into a super aggressive offensive player. And that's been the reason that I've been a little bit down on him as a last-round flyer. But at the same time, what the hell else are you going to do with your last-round pick? Noah Clowney's kind of fun because we have 6 weeks between now and the season starting for us to go, oh, look, they moved Cam Johnson, or, oh, they moved Dorian Finney-Smith. Now Noah Clowney's a monster. And you kind of want to be on that before the moment happens. I even put a little short out about this on the YouTube page and over on Twitter as well. Okay, that one makes sense. But, like, who else is going in the 130 range that has any kind of this type of appeal, which is the mixture of the unknown that could it get better? If it does, then you've got something interesting. So I've softened my stance a little bit. I'm still not hyper into Pods. He's still not my 13th round pick of choice. You guys know me. I end up taking so many risks in the, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth round that I got to make sure that my 11th, 12th, sometimes even 13th round picks are a little safer to cover the fact that some of my early guys are likely to miss a bunch of ball games. So that's why I end up with like a KCP in there, who I realize super boring. Totally understand that. But if I have a 4th round pick who I think is going to miss 25 games, I probably got to get somebody who does a little bit of, say, what that 4th rounder did at a much weaker clip and is probably going to be upright. But if I don't need that guy in the 12th and the 13th, then you take the big swing. Take a mighty hack, see what happens. And Pods is probably in that category of take a swing, see what happens. Call him like my 4th favorite, which is saying something because most of these guys are turds. All right, let's go lightning round really fast just to wrap things up. Anthony Edwards at 11.4, still too soon. Kyrie at 18.8, almost where I'd want to take him. Very close now. Harden at 22.1, still good. Fox at 25.7, a little too early. Maxey down to 26.7, getting there. Almost where I'd want to take him as well. DeJounte down to 30, still not far enough. Şengün up to 31.9, punt free throw build only. Ja, 34.3, he's up there. I don't want him at that point. Cade up to 36.9, it's fine for 8-cat. Freddie VanVleet down to 38.9, maybe my favorite value on the entire board right now. And Desmond Bane down to about 41, 40.9. he's around where I would take him as well. Mid-rounders, Pascal Siakam up to 51.8. That's a little too early for me. Darius Garland up to 62.3. That's fine because of what he brings. Tobias Harris up to 70.5. Still good. Porzingis down to 76.5. Not far enough. Bradley Beal up to 84.1. Still good value there. Jonas Valanciunas down to 85.7. I need him to go a little bit farther. I'm looking for 90s on JV. Hartenstein up to 87.5. Still into him there. There's a lot of room, actually, on Hartenstein. Clint Capella up to 87.6. He's going the wrong way. I don't want him anyway. Jalen Suggs down to 94.2. I would probably take him outside the top 100. Jakob Poeltl up to 98.7. That's fine. Terry Rozier down to 99.9. Trending farther down, and a guy that I'm starting to look at now as he continues to slide and slide and slide. And finally, the last part of our lightning round, RJ Barrett up to 101.2. Don't want him that high. Ivica Zubac's at 102.3. I like him there, even with him moving up. Kessler up to 104.3. Not super into it there. John Collins up to 105.3. I do like that play. Zach Edey down to 107.8. Not far enough. Middleton up to 108. That's too far. Jeremy Grant up to 111.8. I don't want him there. Derek Lively up to 112.9. That's, it's fine. I'm okay with that one. And good for punt free throw. Mitchell Robinson, 120.2 and falling. I like him pretty much in all formats as a swing there. I guess that'd be the end of the beginning of the 11th round. Yeah, I'm fine with that. Okongwu up to 122.6. I'm still good on that value. Colin Sexton up to 123.5. Still good on that value. And Brandin Podziemski up to 127.8. He is my last round pick and my third or fourth favorite last round pick. So it's fine, but I ain't going any earlier on that. And that is your ADP Jumpers episode for this week. We'll do another one probably weekly, just so you guys can see where everybody's going and what that changes as far as who we look at. I got a message right in the middle of today's podcast asking when we're going to do Dan Besbris Bucketology, meaning when am I going to put out my buckets and my rank board? And the answer is a little bit closer to the start of the season. And I have to admit, it's a tiny bit selfish, but things that we put out right now do tend to get lost in the shuffle because we're still 6 weeks away. So around a month from the start of the season, so about the 4-week mark, September 20-something, we're going to start to put out the big episodes. So Dan Besbris rank list episode. We'll have, we'll do the first round board. We'll talk about pairings. We'll talk about the must draft guys, like the true must drafts, the ones you cannot leave your draft without. We'll do the avoid board, the do not draft list. We'll do all those sort of like the big ones. That'll be coming in just a couple of weeks. So if that's what you're waiting on, we're not far away. In the meantime, we're going to keep going through the numbers, keep talking to a lot of guests because I think it's important to hear from a lot of different voices. And I know some of you are like, Dan, these people are talking about guys that you don't like at all. And that's okay. They're trying to convince me, and maybe some of them do. Good example of this. I was like slightly, I would say I was medium into Amen Thompson. I was into him. He was going to be, my 12th round guy, 11th, 12th round guy. And then remember we had Red Bauer on like a Friday. And then I think we had Matt Lawson on like the next Tuesday. And both those guys were like, let me talk to you a little bit more about Amen Thompson. Here's why you like him, but you don't like him enough. And they were right. So these things matter. And sometimes you get a guy on that says a guy that I don't like, and he says a bunch of things to me, and I'm like, yeah, I still don't like that guy. That's okay. But it's important to have these perspectives to understand what everybody's thinking through, because you never know when somebody might hit you with a thing, and you go, ding. So anyway, big episodes, the Dan stuff, the deep Dan stuff, that's coming in a couple of weeks, but we're not too far from that. In the meantime, please continue to like, rate, and subscribe. This was the new must draft / must avoid board from your ADP risers and fallers for the week of September the 9th. And that'll be that. I'm Dan Besbris for Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. We'll see you guys again tomorrow. So long.